This is a massive wake-up call that is sounding yet another alarm bell, as though we hadn't had enough in the past, saying that the impacts of climate change are now widespread and severe, from heat waves, drought, wildfires, to heavy downpours and coastal flooding. And of course, the conclusion from that is that climate change is speeding up, and we are speeding up our solutions landscape, but not at the same speed as the damages. So we are far behind.
Right. And I know you did well to get any sort of agreement at Paris, but is this a sign that that was too little too late, really?
No, actually, the Paris Agreement foresees that there is going to be a decarbonization of the global economy over the next few decades. In fact, the final deadline there is 2050 for net zero. What we have to do now is exactly what the Paris Agreement states, which is every 5 years, countries have to come to the table in the context of the new science, in the context of the technologies that have been developed, the policies that we can apply, and the financial shifts that we can actually accelerate to register under the Paris Agreement the new efforts of emissions reductions that they can undertake. That is something that is foreseen in the Paris Agreement to occur every 5 years. This time at COP26 is the first time that that mechanism, which is called the ratchet mechanism, is actually going to be put to the test.
And if two of the world's biggest emitters, China and India, will have higher emissions in 2030 than they did in 2015, how concerned are you that anything that is agreed at Glasgow will in fact not be carried out?
Well, I don't think that they're going to have higher emissions than they had in 2015. They are actually on a path to reducing their emissions. But let's remember that who has to take the lead here is industrialized countries. Those are the countries that originally caused climate change. Those are the countries that have the resources and the capacity to reduce the most. And those are the countries that have the responsibility and the access to the technologies and the finance to actually take the lead. So let's look first at industrialized countries, at what they're doing themselves and how they're helping developing countries to get on track.
Right. I mean, but there's a lot of sort of political rhetoric, isn't there, around climate change? A lot of leaders saying we must do this and we must do that. To what extent do you think that, you know, now is the time for the rhetoric to end and the sort of real change to start?
Well, I think that is exactly the question that we should be asking, and for which we want an answer, because as Secretary General Gutierrez has already stated this morning, there is no longer a denial in climate change. There is no longer questions whether climate change exists. Now we're into a completely new chapter that establishes the reality and the threat of climate change. And now what is being called for is leadership. Leadership on the part of politicians, leadership on the part of corporations, leadership on the part of all of us as individuals, because this is so important and so urgent and so massive that the responsibility cannot be exported to anyone else. Every single human being right now, independently of what our sphere of influence is, whether that is a national influence, whether that is city influence, whether that's corporate influence, or whether it's only family influence, we all have now the very urgent and huge responsibility to act in a responsible way, to change our behaviors, and certainly to change the decisions on investment.
Right. And China, we mentioned just now, represents 20 to 25%, I think it is, of all global emissions. They've pledged carbon neutrality by 2060, but have yet to put forward any detailed proposals for how they will get there. Does that concern you?
They've actually put forward a pledge to be carbon neutral before 2060. So the before is actually pretty important and leaves space for them to do what they usually do, which is to underpromise and overdeliver, which is quite refreshing compared to other countries that do exactly the opposite. They are currently doing their analysis with all of their constituents to figure out what additional efforts can they bring to the table to by COP26, which is at the end of this year in the United Kingdom. So we don't know yet what China will bring, but all eyes are definitely on China.
Right. And just a quick word on India. I mean, isn't the truth that India is more concerned about the economy and the growth of its economy than it is about climate change?
Well, as they should be, both of those developing countries and all other developing countries are very justifiably concerned about their development and how they're going to bring people out of poverty, because that is their first responsibility. The huge opportunity that they can take advantage of now is to use the new technologies, clean technologies, safer technologies of the 21st century to do exactly that. So they do not have to choose between development and alleviation of poverty. They can actually do that by decarbonizing their economy and by using the technologies and the financial instruments that are being developed for that purpose.
Okay, and just finally, 20 seconds left. You're a founder of an organization called Global Optimism. Do you have any optimism left when it comes to climate?
Yes, I do, because frankly, we cannot afford to do otherwise. There is no way that we can actually close the door on the possibility that we still have of addressing climate change. That is our moral responsibility. And frankly, it's actually much better for us. So out of our enlightened self-interest, in addition to morality, that is what we have to do.